Inside the Titanic's gymnasium, people exercised while the ship sank, the crown jewel of maritime luxury and the starboard side of the boat deck. Just aft of the magnificent forward grand staircase stood one of the most revolutionary features ever installed aboard an ocean liner. The RMS Titanic's first-class gymnasium represented the pinnacle of maritime innovation in 1912, a gleaming testament to mankind's relentless pursuit of luxury, even in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The brightly lit room, with its pristine white-painted oak paneling and polished tile floors, seemed to glow with an otherworldly elegance that defied the very concept of being aboard a ship. The gymnasium was more than just a room filled with exercise equipment. It was a symbol of human ambition and the belief that comfort and refinement could conquer even the vast, unforgiving ocean. Along the wall opposite the entrance, an intricate carved oak installation displayed an illustrated cutaway of an Olympic-class ocean liner, alongside a detailed map depicting the travel routes of the White Star Line throughout the world. These decorative elements served as constant reminders to passengers that they were not merely traveling, they were participating in the adventure of modern civilization itself. The equipment that filled this sacred space of physical refinement was nothing short of extraordinary for its time. Rowing machines stood at attention, like mechanical soldiers, their polished wood and metal surfaces reflecting the electric lighting that bathed the room in a warm, inviting glow. Stationary bikes, their large wheels and intricate gear systems representing the height of exercise technology, waited patiently for passengers who sought to maintain their physical vigor even while crossing the ocean. Perhaps most impressive of all was the electric camel, a peculiar contraption designed to simulate horseback riding, complete with adjustable settings to accommodate riders of different skill levels and preferences. But it was not merely the equipment that made this gymnasium special, it was the atmosphere of refinement and the promise of maintaining one's health and vitality during the voyage. The room represented a microcosm of Edwardian society's obsession with progress, health, and the belief that human ingenuity could overcome any obstacle, even the challenges of ocean travel. The guardian of physical excellence, T.W. McCawley, standing at the center of this temple to physical fitness, was a man whose dedication to his craft would ultimately define his legacy in ways he could never have imagined. Thomas W. McCawley, born around 1876 in Aberdeen, Scotland, was far more than a simple gymnasium instructor. He was the embodiment of the era's fascination with physical culture and the scientific approach to human fitness. His journey to the Titanic had been as remarkable as the ship itself, taking him from the rugged landscapes of Scotland to the sun-baked plains of South Africa, where he had served as a gymnastic instructor after leaving military service at Aldershot. McCawley's time in South Africa had been transformative, shaping him into not just a physical educator, but a true believer in the power of exercise to improve both body and spirit. In Johannesburg, he had operated a successful gymnasium and boxing hall, earning a reputation for his innovative training methods and his ability to inspire others to push beyond their perceived limitations. His return to England had been motivated by dreams of America, and when the opportunity arose to serve aboard the magnificent Titanic, he saw it as the perfect stepping stone to his new life across the Atlantic. Survivors would later describe McCawley as a ruddy-cheeked, spry white man in white flannels, a description that captured not just his physical appearance, but his vibrant energy and enthusiasm for his work. His white flannel uniform was always immaculate, pressed to perfection, and his manner was both professional and genuinely warm. He possessed that rare quality of being able to make even the most reluctant exerciser feel comfortable and motivated, treating each passenger not as a customer but as a person worthy of his complete attention and expertise. On sailing day, April 10, 1912, McCawley had been photographed demonstrating the rowing machine for a group of passengers and dignitaries touring the ship. In that photograph, his pride in his domain is unmistakable. The way he stands beside the machine, his posture straight and confident, his expression serious yet approachable. Behind him in that same image, Harland and Wolff Guaranteed group member William Parr posed on the electric camel, both men frozen in a moment that would become historically significant as the last photograph ever taken of either of them alive. McCawley, his dedication to his work went far beyond the simple mechanics of operating exercise equipment. He understood that for many of his passengers, the gymnasium represented something deeper, a connection to their routines at home, a way to maintain control over their bodies and minds during a journey that, for all its luxury, still required surrendering control to the vast, unpredictable ocean. He took genuine pride in helping passengers maintain their fitness regimens, offering personalized advice and encouragement, and creating an atmosphere where physical exercise became not just acceptable but fashionable. The floating palace's crown jewel, the Gymnasium aboard the Titanic, was revolutionary not merely for its existence, but for its comprehensive approach to passenger wellness and entertainment. In an era when ocean voyages often meant weeks of enforced sedentary living, the inclusion of a fully equipped exercise facility represented a quantum leap forward in passenger amenities. The White Star Line had spared no expense in creating a space that rivaled the finest gymnasiums found in London's most exclusive clubs or New York's most prestigious hotels. Every piece of equipment had been carefully selected and positioned to maximize both functionality and aesthetic appeal. The rowing machines, with their smooth mechanical action and adjustable resistance, allowed passengers to simulate the experience of rowing on a peaceful lake while actually traveling across one of the world's most dangerous stretches of ocean. The stationary bicycles, each one a marvel of engineering precision, featured heavy flywheels that created a remarkably smooth pedaling experience, complete with adjustable seats and handlebars to accommodate passengers of varying heights and physical conditions. The electric camel, perhaps the most unusual piece of equipment, represented the height of exercise innovation. This mechanical device was designed to simulate horseback riding, complete with a realistic saddle and adjustable motion patterns that could provide anything from a gentle trot to a vigorous gallop. For passengers accustomed to daily rides through Hyde Park or Central Park, the electric camel offered a way to maintain their equestrian fitness without the complications of transporting actual horses across the Atlantic. The Gymnasium also featured weights and pulleys, medicine balls, and various other apparatus designed to provide a complete workout experience. The flooring, made of the finest materials available, provided both safety and comfort, while the extensive mirrors along the walls created an illusion of even greater space and allowed users to monitor their form during exercises. The lighting system, one of the most advanced electrical installations on the ship, ensured that the gymnasium remained bright and inviting at all hours of the day or night. But perhaps most importantly, the gymnasium represented a philosophy that physical health and mental well-being were inseparable from true luxury. The White Star Line understood that their first-class passengers were accustomed to maintaining active lifestyles, and the gymnasium allowed them to continue their fitness routines without interruption. This attention to the complete passenger experience was part of what made the Titanic not just a means of transportation, but a destination in itself, a sanctuary of normalcy and chaos. And the night of April 14, 1912, as the Titanic's hull groaned against the massive gash torn by the iceberg, the gymnasium became an unexpected refuge for passengers seeking to escape the growing panic that was beginning to spread throughout the ship. In those crucial early minutes after the collision, when the severity of the situation was not yet fully understood, the gymnasium offered something that was becoming increasingly precious: a sense of normalcy in the face of the incomprehensible. The initial impact had been felt differently throughout the ship, but in the gymnasium, positioned high on the boat deck, the sensation had been relatively mild, more of a shudder than a crash. For passengers who happened to be exercising at the time, or who wandered into the gymnasium in the confusion that followed, the familiar sight of the exercise equipment and the reassuring presence of McCawley provided a psychological anchor in the storm of uncertainty that was beginning to engulf the ship. As word of the collision spread and passengers began to emerge from their in various states of dress and undress, some found their way to the gymnasium almost instinctively. The room, with its bright lights and orderly arrangement, seemed to offer a buffer against the chaos that was beginning to unfold in the corridors outside. Here, surrounded by the symbols of health and vitality, it seemed impossible that anything truly catastrophic could be happening. McCawley, true to his professional nature, remained at his post, ready to assist any passengers who might seek refuge in his domain. His presence alone was comforting to those who entered the gymnasium during those early minutes of crisis. Here was a man who represented order, routine, and the continuation of normal life, qualities that seemed increasingly valuable as reports of the ship's condition became more alarming. The gymnasium's location on the boat deck also meant that passengers who gathered there were among the first to witness the loading of the lifeboats, a process that began in earnest about an hour after the collision. From the windows of the gymnasium, they could observe the crew's attempts to maintain order as they prepared the lifeboats for launching, and they could see the growing crowds of passengers who were beginning to realize that their situation was far more serious than initially believed. The surreal theater of denial, what happened next in the gymnasium, defies easy explanation and stands as one of the most haunting examples of human psychology under extreme stress. As the severity of the Titanic's situation became increasingly apparent to those on deck, a small group of passengers retreated into the gymnasium and, in an act that seems almost incomprehensible in retrospect, began to exercise on the equipment as if nothing unusual was happening. This bizarre scene was witnessed by several survivors who later provided testimony about the surreal sight of well-dressed passengers calmly working out on rowing machines and stationary bicycles, while the greatest maritime disaster in history unfolded around them. These were not passengers who were unaware of the danger. The listing of the ship, the sound of the distress rockets being fired, and the obvious activity surrounding the lifeboats made the situation impossible to ignore. Rather, they seemed to be engaging in a form of psychological denial so profound that it manifested as an almost ritualistic adherence to normalcy. The psychology behind this behavior offers a fascinating glimpse into the human mind's capacity for self-protection in the face of overwhelming threat. For these passengers, many of whom had lived lives of privilege and control, the idea that they could be helpless victims of circumstances beyond their influence was so foreign that their minds simply refused to accept it. Instead, they retreated into familiar patterns of behavior, finding comfort in the routine of physical exercise and the illusion of control that came with operating machinery. McCawley, observing this strange tableau, continued to fulfill his duties as gymnasium instructor, offering quiet assistance and maintaining the professional demeanor that had made him so well regarded by the passengers. If he found their behavior unusual, he gave no indication of it, treating each person who entered his gymnasium with the same courtesy and attention he had shown throughout the voyage. In many ways, his continued professional behavior served to reinforce the illusion of normalcy that these passengers so desperately needed to maintain the sight of passengers. Exercising while the ship sank became one of the most reported and discussed aspects of the Titanic disaster, precisely because it seemed to capture something essential about human nature in crisis. Here were individuals who, faced with the unthinkable, chose to retreat into the familiar rather than confront the reality of their situation. Their actions were neither heroic nor cowardly. They were profoundly human, representing the complex ways in which the mind attempts to protect itself when confronted with circumstances too overwhelming to process. Richard Norris Williams, a champion's final workout among the passengers who sought refuge in the gymnasium during the ship's final hours, was a young man whose presence there would later become legendary. Richard Norris Williams, just 21 years old and traveling with his father Charles, was no ordinary passenger. He was an accomplished athlete, a tennis player of considerable skill, who would later become one of the greatest players in the history of American tennis. But on the night of April 14, 1912, he was simply a young man trying to make sense of an impossible situation. Williams had boarded the Titanic at Cherbourg, France, with his father, both of them looking forward to their new life in America. The elder Williams had business interests that required their relocation, and for young Richard, the move represented an opportunity to pursue his tennis career in a country that was beginning to embrace the sport with unprecedented enthusiasm. The gymnasium aboard the Titanic had been a source of particular interest to Williams, whose athletic training regimen was already rigorous and disciplined. As the crisis unfolded, Williams found himself drawn to the gymnasium, perhaps seeking the comfort of familiar physical activity in the face of the incomprehensible. The sight of this young, athletic man calmly working out while the ship listed more severely with each passing minute became one of the most vivid and haunting images reported by survivors. Here was someone in the prime of his life, with everything to live for, engaging in behavior that seemed to defy not just logic but basic survival instinct. Williams later survived the disaster, rescued from the frigid Atlantic waters after the ship's final plunge, but not without paying a terrible price. His father perished in the sinking, and Williams himself suffered severe injuries from the cold water that would affect his legs for the rest of his life. Doctors actually recommended amputation of his legs due to the extensive damage from prolonged exposure to the freezing ocean, but Williams refused, instead embarking on a rehabilitation program that involved, ironically, extensive exercise and physical therapy. The young man who had exercised in the Titanic's Gymnasium, while the ship sank, would go on to win the US Open Tennis Championship in 1914 and 1916, and would capture an Olympic gold medal in 1924. His story became one of the most remarkable tales of survival and determination to emerge from the Titanic disaster. But it was his presence in the gymnasium during those final hours that captured the imagination of the public and historians alike. William's behavior in the gymnasium was later analyzed by psychologists and historians as an example of what might be called productive denial, the use of familiar, constructive activity to maintain psychological equilibrium in the face of overwhelming stress. His decision to exercise while the ship sank was not an act of ignorance or foolishness, but rather a sophisticated psychological coping mechanism that allowed him to maintain his mental clarity and physical readiness for whatever might come next. McCawley's final stand, a professional to the end. As the Titanic's situation became increasingly desperate, with the ship's bow settling deeper into the icy Atlantic and the stern beginning to rise visibly out of the water, Thomas McCawley remained steadfast in his commitment to his duties. His behavior during these final hours has become legendary, representing not just personal courage but a profound dedication to professional responsibility that transcended even the instinct for self-preservation. Witnesses reported that McCawley continued to assist passengers in the gymnasium with the same calm professionalism he had shown throughout the voyage. When first-class passenger William Carter approached him and urged him to put on a life jacket, McCawley's response revealed the depth of his character and the clarity of his thinking, even in the face of mortal danger. "I won't wear one, sir," McCawley said with a smile. "It'll just slow me down and impede my stroke." This remarkable statement, recorded by surviving passengers and later verified by multiple sources, reveals several crucial aspects of McCawley's mindset during those final hours. First, it demonstrates that he was fully aware of the gravity of the situation. He understood that he might need to swim for his life. Second, it shows that he had made a calculated decision about how best to survive, choosing mobility over buoyancy based on his confidence in his swimming abilities. Finally, his smile suggests that he maintained not just his composure, but his essential humanity and even a touch of humor in the face of death. McCawley's decision to refuse the life jacket was based on more than just confidence in his swimming abilities. As a professional physical educator with extensive experience in South Africa, he understood the mechanics of swimming and survival in water better than most. He correctly assessed that the life jackets available on the Titanic, while providing buoyancy, would also severely restrict movement and make swimming virtually impossible. Given his exceptional physical condition and swimming skills, he calculated that he would have a better chance of survival by relying on his own abilities rather than the cumbersome life preservers. The gymnasium instructor's decision to remain at his post while the ship sank also reflected the professional culture of the era, particularly among those who worked aboard luxury liners. There was an unwritten code that crew members, regardless of their specific duties, had responsibilities to passengers that transcended personal safety. McCawley understood that his presence in the gymnasium, his calm demeanor, and his continued availability to assist passengers served a crucial psychological function during those terrifying final hours. As the ship's list became more pronounced, and the sound of rushing water became audible even in the gymnasium, McCawley made his final preparations. According to witness accounts, he removed his white flannel jacket and rolled up his sleeves, preparing for what he believed would be his swim to safety. His actions were methodical and deliberate, showing no signs of panic or desperation. He had made his decision and was prepared to live or die by it. The psychology of the gymnasium refugees. The passengers who remained in the gymnasium during the Titanic's final hours represented a fascinating cross-section of human psychology under extreme duress. Their behavior, which seemed inexplicable to many observers both at the time and in the decades since, actually reveals profound insights into how the human mind processes catastrophic situations and the various ways people attempt to maintain psychological control when faced with circumstances that render them essentially powerless. Understanding their actions requires recognizing that for many first-class passengers, the gymnasium represented more than just a place to exercise. It was a symbol of their normal lives, their daily routines, and their sense of control over their physical and social environment. These were individuals who were accustomed to managing their lives with precision, scheduling their days around business appointments, social obligations, and carefully planned recreation. The gymnasium, with its familiar equipment and orderly atmosphere, provided a psychological anchor to that ordered existence. The act of exercising while the ship sank can be understood as a form of active meditation, a way of focusing the mind on familiar physical sensations and routines while blocking out the overwhelming reality of the disaster unfolding around them. For these passengers, the rhythmic motion of rowing machines or the steady pedaling of stationary bicycles provided a form of mental refuge that allowed them to process their situation at a pace their minds could handle. Some witnesses reported that the passengers in the gymnasium appeared to be in a state of almost trance-like concentration, their movements mechanical and repetitive. This behavior is consistent with what modern psychologists recognize as dissociation, a natural protective mechanism that allows the mind to separate from traumatic experiences. By focusing intensely on the physical act of exercising, these passengers were able to create a mental buffer between themselves and the reality of their situation. The social dynamics in the gymnasium during those final hours were also revealing. The presence of other passengers engaging in the same seemingly irrational behavior served to normalize and validate each person's choice to remain there. In psychological terms, this created a form of social proof that reinforced their collective denial of the disaster. If others were exercising, it must be the appropriate response to the situation. McCawley's role in maintaining this psychological sanctuary cannot be overstated. His continued professional demeanor and his willingness to assist passengers with their exercises provided crucial validation for their behavior. His presence suggested that their actions were not only acceptable but appropriate, giving them permission to continue their psychological coping strategy without having to confront the reality of their situation. The ship's final moments and the gymnasium's fate as the Titanic entered her death throes. The gymnasium became a stage for one of the most poignant and tragic scenes in maritime history. The ship's increasing list to starboard meant that the equipment began to shift and slide, creating an eerie soundtrack of moving metal and creaking wood that accompanied the more distant sounds of panic and desperation from other parts of the vessel. The electric lighting, powered by the ship's generators, continued to function almost until the very end, casting long shadows that danced across the white-painted walls as the ship's angle became more severe. The passengers who had remained in the gymnasium during the early stages of the disaster found themselves facing an increasingly untenable situation. As the ship's condition deteriorated, the rowing machines and stationary bicycles that had provided psychological comfort now became obstacles to movement as they broke free from their moorings and slid across the tilting floor. The carefully maintained order of the room dissolved into chaos, forcing even the most determined deniers of reality to confront the truth of their situation. McCawley, recognizing that his gymnasium could no longer serve as a refuge, began encouraging the remaining passengers to make their way to the boat deck and attempt to find space in the remaining lifeboats, or at least position themselves for the best possible chance of survival when the ship went down. His transformation from gymnasium instructor to survival guide was seamless, demonstrating once again his remarkable ability to adapt to circumstances, while maintaining his essential character and professionalism. The final minutes of the gymnasium's existence were witnessed by only a few survivors, most of whom were making their way toward the stern as the bow section became completely submerged. They reported that McCawley remained in or near the gymnasium until nearly the end, helping passengers navigate the increasingly treacherous conditions and offering whatever assistance he could provide. His white flannel uniform, so carefully maintained throughout the voyage, became torn and stained as he worked to help others reach safety. As the ship's forward section plunged beneath the surface, the gymnasium was among the first areas to be completely flooded. The exercise equipment, so carefully designed and installed to provide luxury and comfort, became twisted metal and broken wood as the immense pressure of the water rushing into the ship destroyed everything in its path. The bright electric lights went out one by one, and the cheerful white-painted walls that had seemed so inviting just hours before disappeared forever beneath the dark waters of the North Atlantic. The destruction of the gymnasium marked the end of an era in more ways than one. Not only did it represent the loss of a remarkable feat of marine engineering and luxury accommodation, but it also symbolized the end of the era's naive belief that human technology and ingenuity could triumph over the raw power of nature. The room that had been designed to showcase humanity's mastery over the physical world became instead a monument to the limits of that mastery. Eyewitness accounts, voices from the abyss, testimonies of survivors who witnessed the strange scenes in the Titanic's Gymnasium provide some of the most haunting and psychologically complex accounts to emerge from the disaster. These eyewitness reports, collected during official inquiries and private interviews in the days and weeks following the sinking, paint a picture of human behavior that challenges our understanding of how people respond to mortal danger. Colonel Archibald Gracie, one of the most methodical and reliable witnesses to survive the disaster, reported encountering passengers in the gymnasium who appeared to be going through the motions of their normal exercise routines with an almost mechanical precision. Gracie, who was himself struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the disaster, found the sight so disturbing that he initially questioned his own perception of events. Another survivor, first-class passenger Edith Russell, described seeing gentlemen in evening wear pedaling the gymnasium bicycles as if they were taking their morning constitutional in Hyde Park. Russell noted that these men appeared to be carrying on conversations about ordinary matters, business, the weather, plans for their arrival in New York, while the ship listed more severely with each passing minute. Perhaps most poignant was the account provided by Margaret Brown, later known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, who reported a conversation with McCawley during the early stages of the crisis. According to Brown, McCawley had expressed confidence that the ship's designers and builders had created something that could withstand any emergency. He told me that the gymnasium had been designed to operate even if the ship listed significantly, Brown recalled, and that passengers should feel free to continue using the facilities as a way of staying calm and maintaining their health during the emergency. The accuracy of some of these accounts has been questioned by historians, particularly given the traumatic circumstances under which they were witnessed and the emotional state of the survivors when they provided their testimonies. However, the consistency of the reports and the detail provided by multiple independent witnesses suggests that the basic facts of what occurred in the gymnasium are reliable. Several survivors also reported that McCawley had continued to provide instruction and assistance to passengers who were using the exercise equipment, maintaining his professional demeanor even as the ship's condition became increasingly dire. These accounts consistently describe him as calm, competent, and focused on the welfare of his passengers rather than his own safety. The psychological impact of witnessing these scenes was profound for many survivors. Several reported that the image of passengers exercising while the ship sank haunted them for years afterward, representing a kind of existential absurdity that challenged their understanding of human nature and rational behavior. For some, it became a symbol of the denial and false confidence that they believed had contributed to the disaster in the first place. The technical marvel, equipment that defied the ocean, the exercise equipment that filled the Titanic's gymnasium, represented the pinnacle of early 20th century fitness technology, each piece carefully designed and manufactured to provide the most advanced workout experience available to the era's health-conscious elite. Understanding the sophistication of this equipment helps explain why passengers found such psychological comfort in its familiar operation during the ship's final hours. The rowing machines, perhaps the most popular pieces of equipment in the gymnasium, were marvels of mechanical engineering that used a combination of pulleys, springs, and adjustable resistance mechanisms to simulate the experience of rowing a shell through calm water. Each machine was constructed of the finest hardwoods, polished to a mirror finish and fitted with leather seats and handles that provided both comfort and durability. The smooth operation of these machines, combined with their substantial weight and stable construction, created an illusion of solidity and permanence that seemed to defy the reality of being aboard a ship in the middle of the ocean. The stationary bicycles represented an even more sophisticated approach to maritime exercise equipment. Each bicycle featured a heavy flywheel that created momentum and smoothed out the pedaling action, while adjustable seats and handlebars allowed users of different heights and builds to find comfortable riding positions. The bikes were equipped with resistance mechanisms that could simulate everything from leisurely rides through city parks to challenging climbs up mountain roads. The quality of their construction was such that the pedaling motion was virtually silent, adding to the serene atmosphere of the gymnasium. The electric camel, perhaps the most innovative piece of equipment aboard the ship, represented a revolutionary approach to simulating horseback riding for passengers who were accustomed to daily equestrian exercise. This mechanical device used a complex system of motors, springs, and adjustable motion patterns to recreate the various gaits of a horse. From a gentle walk to an energetic gallop, users could adjust both the intensity and the pattern of the motion, allowing for a customized riding experience that could provide either gentle therapeutic movement or vigorous cardiovascular exercise. Additional equipment included weightlifting apparatus with adjustable resistance systems, medicine balls of various weights and sizes, and specialized stretching and flexibility equipment. The gymnasium also featured what would today be recognized as some of the earliest examples of circuit training equipment, with stations designed to provide a complete workout that addressed all aspects of physical fitness. The lighting system in the gymnasium deserves special mention, as it was one of the most advanced electrical installations on the ship. The combination of overhead electric lights and strategically placed mirrors created an environment that was both bright and flattering, allowing users to monitor their form and technique while exercising. This attention to both functional and aesthetic lighting was typical of the Titanic's overall design philosophy, which sought to provide not just luxury but also practical excellence in every detail. The social hierarchy of fitness. The gymnasium aboard the Titanic was far more than just a collection of exercise equipment. It was a carefully orchestrated social space that reflected and reinforced the rigid class distinctions that defined Edwardian society. Access to the gymnasium was strictly limited to first-class passengers, creating an exclusive environment where the wealthy could pursue their fitness regimens without having to encounter passengers from lower social strata. This exclusivity was not merely a matter of ticket prices or cabin assignments. The gymnasium represented a particular lifestyle and set of values that were associated with the upper classes of the early 20th century. Physical fitness, during this era, was increasingly viewed as both a moral obligation and a mark of social distinction. The wealthy were expected to maintain their physical condition, not just for health reasons, but as a demonstration of their self-discipline, their access to leisure time, and their understanding of modern scientific approaches to wellness. That the scheduled hours for gymnasium use were carefully planned to accommodate the social routines of first-class passengers. Morning sessions were typically reserved for gentlemen who wished to exercise before breakfast, while afternoon hours were often designated for ladies who preferred to maintain their fitness regimens after lunch and before the evening's social activities. These scheduling decisions reflected the era's strict gender roles and the different expectations placed on men and women regarding physical activity. McCawley's role as gymnasium instructor required him to navigate these complex social dynamics with considerable skill. He needed to provide professional fitness instruction while simultaneously acknowledging the social superiority of his clients. His background as a military man and his experience operating his own gymnasium in South Africa had prepared him well for this challenge, giving him the confidence to interact with wealthy passengers while maintaining appropriate deference to their social status. The equipment itself was arranged and maintained in a manner that reflected these social considerations. The most prestigious pieces of equipment, the electric camel and the finest rowing machines, were positioned prominently near the windows, where users could enjoy ocean views while exercising. Less glamorous equipment was placed in less prominent locations, creating a subtle hierarchy even within the gymnasium itself. During the ship's final hours, these social distinctions took on a tragic irony. The gymnasium, which had been designed as a symbol of privilege and exclusivity, became a refuge for passengers whose wealth and social status proved utterly meaningless in the face of the disaster. The exercise equipment that had once reinforced their sense of superiority became props in a desperate psychological drama as they struggled to maintain their composure while their world literally sank beneath their feet. The science of exercise in 1912, the early 20th century, marked a revolutionary period in the understanding of physical fitness and exercise science, and the Titanic's gymnasium represented the practical application of these emerging theories about human health and performance. The equipment and programs offered aboard the ship reflected the era's growing belief that scientific approaches to physical fitness could not only improve health, but also enhance mental acuity and moral character. The rowing machines in the gymnasium were based on contemporary research that identified rowing as one of the most complete forms of exercise available. providing both cardiovascular conditioning and strength training for virtually every major muscle group in the body. The mechanical design of these machines was informed by studies of Olympic rowers and competitive athletes, with careful attention paid to reproducing the biomechanics of actual rowing while adapting the movement for use aboard a ship. The stationary bicycles reflected the era's enthusiasm for cycling as both recreation and exercise, but their design incorporated advanced understanding of human physiology and the principles of cardiovascular training. The heavy flywheels used in these machines were specifically designed to create smooth, consistent resistance that would promote steady heart rate elevation without the jarring impacts associated with riding bicycles on rough roads or uneven terrain. The electric camel represented perhaps the most sophisticated application of exercise science available at the time. This device was based on research into the therapeutic benefits of simulated horseback riding, which was believed to provide unique benefits for posture, balance, and core strength. The ability to adjust both the intensity and the pattern of movement allowed McCawley to prescribe specific riding programs for individual passengers, based on their fitness levels and health goals. The Gymnasium also featured equipment designed, according to emerging theories about the importance of flexibility and range of motion in overall fitness. Stretching apparatus and flexibility training devices reflected growing understanding that physical fitness required more than just strength and endurance. It also demanded mobility and coordination. McCawley's training and experience had exposed him to these cutting-edge theories about exercise and human performance. His work in South Africa had brought him into contact with military fitness programs and competitive athletic training methods that were among the most advanced in the world at the time. This knowledge allowed him to provide passengers with fitness guidance that was both scientifically sound and practically effective. The tragedy of the Gymnasium's destruction was not just the loss of expensive equipment, but the loss of what represented one of the most advanced applications of exercise science ever installed aboard a ship. The research and knowledge that had gone into creating this facility disappeared beneath the waves along with everything else, setting back the development of maritime fitness facilities by many years. The aftermath, memories and monuments in the immediate aftermath of the Titanic disaster, the story of the Gymnasium and the passengers who exercised while the ship sank, captured public imagination in a way that few other aspects of the tragedy could match. The image of well-dressed passengers calmly working out while the greatest maritime disaster in history unfolded around them seemed to encapsulate something essential about human nature, class consciousness, and the psychological mechanisms people use to cope with incomprehensible tragedy. Newspaper accounts of the disaster invariably included references to the Gymnasium scenes, often focusing on the seemingly absurd contrast between the mundane act of exercise and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding it. Editorial writers and social commentators used these accounts to explore broader themes about modern civilization, the hubris of the wealthy, and the psychology of denial in the face of disaster. McCawley's story, in particular, became a focal point for discussions about duty, professionalism, and heroism. His decision to remain at his post and continue serving passengers until the end, combined with his confident refusal to wear a life jacket, made him a symbol of the kind of quiet heroism that many people found more admirable than more dramatic acts of sacrifice. Unlike some of the ship's officers and crew members who became famous for their final acts, McCawley's heroism was found in his steadfast commitment to the ordinary duties of his position. The survivors who had witnessed the Gymnasium scenes carried those memories with them for the rest of their lives, and many of them spoke and wrote about their experiences for decades afterward. For some, the memory became a source of comfort, representing human resilience and the ability to maintain dignity even in the face of death. For others, it remained a source of psychological disturbance, a reminder of how disconnected people could become from reality when confronted with circumstances beyond their understanding. Richard Norris Williams, the young tennis player who had exercised in the Gymnasium during the ship's final hours, went on to achieve remarkable success in his athletic career, but he never forgot the experience of that night. In interviews throughout his life, he spoke about how the routine of exercise had helped him maintain his mental clarity and emotional stability during the crisis, crediting his time in the Gymnasium with helping him survive the ordeal that followed. The physical remains of the Gymnasium, located deep on the ocean floor with the rest of the Titanic's wreckage,